example, if we have all the money, resources, time, stuff we could ever imagine, but we're miserable, what's its true value? Now, at this time of year, many of our projects are either winding down, taking a momentary pause, or arriving at some degree of completion, ready for us to pick up something new after the holiday season. If you're anything like me, you'll be looking at the time ahead and asking yourself how you could possibly make the most of it. And by making the most of it, I mean coming back into whatever you describe as or refer to as work with renewed focus, perspective, clarity. And you could argue that this time of the year isn't necessarily a time of the year when one should be perhaps putting pressure on themselves to arrive at these outcomes. However, again, if you're anything like me, this isn't an experience which is unique just to one single holiday period. This is how you live your life in general. And the pursuit of more doesn't necessarily have to take place for the purposes of a defined outcome. As I've come to discover in recent years, the pursuit itself actually is the means and the end. The outcome is somewhat of a secondary benefit. And so much of what we do in life these days seems to be tied to having a measurable outcome for the purposes of sustaining something or growing something or being able to do something that's measurable, as if that has greater meaning than the quality of the experience we're able to have in any given moment. So whilst the pursuit of more for the sake of more seems kind of pointless in those terms, I'd argue it still has a valuable place in our lives. And it doesn't have to exist independently of an outcome. It's not to say that we don't have to gravitate towards a particular vision or goal that we're seeking. It's just to recognize that whether the goal or the vision is realized or not, the pursuit isn't simply just the means to get there. It can be enjoyable. It can be liberating, in fact. I think it's an unfortunate byproduct of our current society where there is perhaps you could say unbalanced emphasis on achievement and outcome, material gain and proof. That seems to be the measure of progress for many, and so we're easily sucked into this cycle of buying things we believe is going to make us happier or advancing our life in some meaningful way, or working harder to achieve a particular outcome of some description. But we find when we get there that the sense of relief is rather short-lived. And whilst we've attained the thing that we've been seeking, the thing that we've really been seeking continues to elude us. The thing that we're really seeking is some degree of fulfillment or satisfaction with our lives. That's why sometimes it pays to take a step back. To consider whether or not we're looking for an outcome for the sake of it, or whether we're pursuing an outcome whilst remaining present to the pursuit. Everything else in nature grows because that's its nature. The nature of all life is expansion. And expansion isn't always measurable. Certainly not when it concerns the inner landscape of life, the realm of thoughts and feelings. Even though the thoughts and feelings we entertain and curate on a moment-to-moment basis will largely dictate the actions we take and the outcomes we achieve by extension, it's very difficult to quantify. And again, because we're in a society where many things are valued based on their ability to be measured, we find it hard to place value on something which has no measure, because the measure is always down to the individual. It's subjective. However, again, I would argue it's nonetheless equally as, if not more valuable than anything we could possibly achieve on the outside. Because after all, if we have all the money, resources, time, stuff we could ever imagine, but we're miserable, what's its true value? Equally, you could also argue on the opposite side of things that we could be blissfully happy but living on the streets. Personally, I'm in favor of balance. Balance in the form of understanding what I'd like to create, holding that vision in mind, and taking the logical steps towards its realization, but also enjoying the process as much as one can. And that's the thing about human life, is that we'd like to believe everything should be easy and comfortable and convenient, but rarely is that the case. For every summer there is a winter. As I'm walking around on this beach at the moment in the middle of winter, it's a bit cold. However, I know the summer will come. When exactly? I'm not so sure, but I know that it will. And so, if we approach our life and our experience in the same way, knowing that the things that we seek will materialize, even if the time scale by which they do so is to some degree out of our control, then it does enable us to a greater degree to weather the storms and to continue moving forward even when things seem bleak and we feel a bit lost and we feel like nothing's really working or moving forwards. I'm certainly no stranger to that. I don't think any of you are. The real difference between any of us is whether or not we choose to move forwards. And it doesn't really feel like anything is working. And I don't necessarily mean taking action. I just mean not giving up. Taking a wider zoom, if you like, larger perspective on things, and seeing that in the grand scheme of our lives, for the 70 or 80 or 90 or however many decades we get to spend here, one or two bad days, or even a year of bad days, in the grand scheme of things, is somewhat less serious than it would seem in the moment. And so I'd encourage you to keep that in mind. All is subject to change, and you have a greater degree of influence towards that change than you may currently realize or be giving yourself credit for. So if you can do anything this festive period, it's taking a slightly wider view of things, just to zoom out. Put things into perspective.